Stop! You haven't subscribed to the channel yet? Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. The suburban house was quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy, filled with unspoken words and unresolved tension. The McCarthys had always been the typical American family. 3 kids, a dog, a home, and a quiet neighborhood. James, 38, had always been the provider. He worked long hours as an engineer, trying to keep up with the growing expenses of a family of 5. But lately, the one thing that had always been rock solid in his life, his body, was starting to fail him. It wasn't the kind of failure you can easily explain or fix with a simple trip to the doctor. No, this was personal. It started a little over a year ago when James first noticed things weren't quite right in the bedroom. At first, he blamed it on exhaustion. After all, who would be tired after working 12-hour days, trying to support a family? But the problem didn't go away. It got worse. Rachel, his wife, was patient in the beginning. She was understanding when James first started taking medication to fix the problem. She even tried to lighten the mood when the pills didn't work, offering encouraging words and comforting embraces. "We'll figure this out," she'd say, stroking his back as they lay in bed. "It's just stress, babe. You're working yourself too hard." James wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that things would get better, that he'd eventually regain what felt like a vital part of himself. But as months passed, his efforts to fix the issue fell flat. The pills weren't working, the stress was mounting, and the intimacy that once bound them together began to fade into the background of their daily lives. A year later, the frustration in their marriage became palpable. The bedroom was no longer a place of warmth, but of cold tension. Rachel began to withdraw, and James noticed. He could see it in her eyes when they sat together at the dinner table, the way her gaze lingered on nothing, lost in thought. The resentment slowly crept into their conversations. One night, as they sat on the couch after putting the kids to bed, Rachel finally broke the silence. "James," she began hesitantly, her voice softer than usual. "I can't keep doing this." James looked up, his heart sinking, knowing where this conversation was going. "Doing what?" he asked, though he already knew. "This," she gestured vaguely between them. "Us, our marriage. I feel like we're just 2 people living in the same house, not like a couple anymore." "I know it's been hard, Rachel." James sighed, rubbing his temples, already feeling the stress of the day mixed with the weight of her words. "I'm doing everything I can." "I don't feel like a woman anymore," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "You don't touch me. You don't even look at me like you used to. It's like I don't exist." "That's not fair," James said, his frustration rising. "You know why I've been distant. It's not because I don't love you or don't want you. I can't." He hated saying it out loud, hated admitting to the one thing he felt he should have control over. "But that's the problem, James," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I need more. I need to feel wanted. And right now, I feel like I'm invisible, like I'm growing old, while you're too wrapped up in your work or your problems to notice." James stood up, pacing the living room. "You think I don't want this fixed? Do you have any idea what it feels like to lose something so basic? I'm working all day, I'm exhausted, and on top of that, I feel like a failure because I can't even." "Stop," Rachel said, standing up and wiping her eyes. "I don't need a lecture on how hard it's been for you. I know you're stressed, but so am I. And I'm telling you, I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." The conversation ended there, with no resolution. Rachel started spending more time out of the house after that. Weekends with friends, nights out in the neighboring state. She said it was to clear her head. But James couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then one weekend and she didn't come home. James had spent the day taking care of the kids, cleaning up the house, and checking his phone for updates from Rachel. By midnight, there was still no word. He tried calling her, but every call went straight to voicemail. She finally stumbled in the next morning, looking disheveled and offering some half-baked excuse about getting lost and staying the night with her friends. "You couldn't text me?" James asked, his patience wearing thin. "You just disappear and I'm supposed to be okay with that." Rachel shrugged, tossing her bag onto the couch. "I told you we got lost." "What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that you didn't come home," James said, his voice rising. "And I've been sitting here wondering if something happened to you or if you just didn't care." She sighed dramatically. "Oh, please, you're overreacting." James stared at her, his anger boiling over. "Am I? Or is there something you're not telling me?" Rachel crossed her arms defensively. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you disappearing all the time, not answering your phone, coming back with these stupid excuses. Who is he, Rachel?" For a moment, she just stood there, staring at him with wide eyes. And then, to his surprise, her face crumbled and she burst into tears. James froze. This wasn't the reaction he was expecting. "Rachel, I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far." James felt the floor drop out from under him. He didn't need to ask what she meant. The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his heart pounding in his chest. "You cheated on me." His voice was barely above a whisper, as if saying it any louder would make it more real. Rachel nodded, still crying. "I didn't want to, but I felt so alone, James. You hadn't touched me in over a year. I felt like I didn't matter anymore." James's mind raced, trying to process her words. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, had betrayed him. But more than that, she'd done it because of him, because he couldn't fix himself. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. I'm done," James said, his voice shaking. "We're done." Rachel looked up at him, eyes wide with shock. "What?" "James, no, please. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can." "No," James said firmly. "I'm done trying to fix something that's already broken. But we can work through this," she begged. "You'll get better and I'll make it up to you. I love you, James. I don't want to lose our family." James shook his head, the weight of her betrayal crushing any hope he had left. "You already lost me the moment you chose someone else. You think we can just go back to how things were after this?" Rachel sobbed harder, collapsing onto the couch. "Please don't do this. Think about the kids. Think about us. We've been through so much. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," James said coldly. "It was a choice. And now I'm making mine." He turned and walked out of the room, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. The pain was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Relief. Relief that he didn't have to keep pretending everything was okay. The next few weeks were a blur of divorce papers, awkward conversations with the kids, and tense moments of silence between him and Rachel. She tried to backtrack, tried to convince him that they could rebuild what they had, but James wasn't interested. The trust had been shattered, and there was no coming back from that. Reader comments, "Wow, this was heartbreaking, but so relatable. The way James handled the situation showed such strength. I can't imagine how hard that must have been." Stat Reader 33. "Rachel is selfish, no doubt about it. If she really loved James, she would have been more supportive instead of seeking attention elsewhere. Good for him for walking away." Loyal Life 77. "This is the kind of story that makes you realize how fragile marriages can be. Sometimes love isn't enough when trust is broken. So painful, but also empowering for James. Heartbroken, Dad. I feel for both of them. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about neglect and emotional distance. But Rachel made the wrong choice, and that's on her." Marriage counselor. "I hope James finds peace after this. No one deserves to be treated like that, especially when they're doing everything to provide for their family." Workingman.